Welcome to another episode of SENSimilla. I am Will Reed. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Zach Lipson, along with his brother Ross, recognized a huge need within the cannabis industry when they founded Dutchie, which is now one of the fastest growing companies within the entire cannabis industry. Zach, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
And just so you are not in a hotel room. You are not in a hotel room. We want to make that abundantly clear.
I know it looks that way.
You're not on the run.
I am not on the run. I am not currently hold out in a hotel through the pandemic. I'm actually at a friend's house right now.
Very hotel looking, but we're not judging here. We're not judging here, Zach. Again, I appreciate your time. You are the chief product officer.
Yes,
at Dutchie, right, along with your brother. Can you tell us a bit about pre-Dutchie? How'd you get?
Yeah.
What happened pre-Dutchie? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Pre-Dutchie, yeah. So we started the company back in 2017, kind of the second half of 2017, and I've been in software development for roughly about a decade. I've been a product designer, I've been a product manager, and pretty much a founder with every company that I've been a part of. I've been in the fintech space. I ran a social networking company way back at the beginning of my career. And my whole life has been kind of this pursuit of trying to find interesting ways to solve problems through design. And then also kind of marry that with interest in business. So basically I've been an artist my entire life. I found the graphics programs in high school, Photoshop and Illustrator, really took to it. It kind of started to open the world up a little bit to me. I was having a lot of fun with creating different things, and the sky was kind of the limit. So that carried me through into college. I was very interested in business, as I mentioned before. And Ross and I, my brother and I, we really grew up in a very entrepreneurial household. So we had been inundated with business and just inspiration, motivation to start things. And if you had an idea, you could build it, you could start a company around it. There's nothing that was going to prevent you from doing that.
Your dad's an inventor, correct?
My dad's an inventor. He's got
like Rick Moranis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Except he didn't figure out a way to shrink us. No, he's an inventor, and we grew up in Detroit. So Detroit's like a city that's really known for its hustle and its grind. And our dad was really creative and inventive, and also had a really strong kind of hustle. So imagine being a kid and kind of growing up around that. Like, I would come to him and I'd go, "Dad, I've got this idea," and he would go, "Well, let's do it. Let's build it. Let's go talk to my patent attorney." I'd go and I'd say, "Well, what do we do next? How do I get it built?" And he'd go, "Oh, well, you got to get a CAD drawing made." I'd go, "What's a CAD drawing?" So and he would kind of us through it. And we're very much formed in those in those younger years, and you get conditioned to know that nothing else. Like we didn't know, like, oh, you're going to go to school, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be a lawyer. There's nothing wrong with those professions at all, but we had it different when we were kids. So I really took to the inventive, creative side that my dad had. My brother took to the sales and business side that he had. He kind of split off into two parts. We got both of those things in spades. And, and that's how our career started to develop, when we were a bit older. Is I went off to become kind of somebody who's very interested in product, took to the creative and artistic side that I had always kind of embraced as my younger years. And when I came out of college, I started to get hooked and very, very interested, fascinated by the technology world. I remember, this is like back in the early days of Facebook, and Twitter was just coming out. There was Dig and Stumble Upon and a bunch of companies that some of them don't exist today, but like they were like the hot, interesting things. Web 2.0 was the buzzword back then. Social networking kind of all the rage. And we were learning a lot. Like the internet was going like really big proliferation period of like what the web could do to solve interesting problems and bring people together. I got hooked on it. I started reading TechCrunch every single day, all day. I was like, this is the coolest thing. I want to do something in technology. I sort of saw it as like the next evolution of my problem solving. Like like using the internet, I could solve any, I could, it really opened up. It wasn't, you know, the sky was the limit now. Like I could do anything I wanted pretty much. And I identified a really interesting problem that, and mind you, I was in graduating college at the time. I realized that men and women didn't really have a great way to communicate with each other about dating, relationships, and things like that. Like my thesis was that we actually had really poor ways of getting that information. We were talking to our friends. We were talking to, you know, our buddies. I was getting information from my buddies about girls, and that just wasn't, what a horrible source of data.
Your buddies for sure
right?
don't know anything.
My buddies are terrible. Yeah. So my thesis was, why don't we open this conversation up and get a bunch of different perspectives from you know, maybe from the opposite sex.
So just crowdsourcing dating tips sort of thing, like
pretty much, yeah. And you know, it could be from the same sex, it could be from the opposite sex. You know, it really was very personal and individual, anonymous. And that was the critical part of this, is that when you take identity out of it, the information can free flow. Long story short, I worked on that company for about 2 years. It was my first foray into startups. I was a founder. I was the CEO of the company. I was, of course, very designer.
You were still in college.
I was like coming right out of college. It was the very tail end of my college career. And then for about 2 years after I graduated.
Wow.
So I worked on that company for a couple of years. We raised some money, and I learned how to design software just by trial and error. I screwed up a bunch of times. I fixed those mistakes. I learned a lot. I started working with engineers and learning how to speak their language and talk to them. It was a breeding ground for education in startups, in tech. And
just throwing yourself right into that fire.
For me, that's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
I could read books till I'm blue in the face, but I've got to get in there, roll my sleeves up and do it. And I've got to make mistakes. We learn from mistakes. We learn from the mistakes that we made. The key is that when you make those mistakes, you realize it quickly and you pivot quickly. And that's what we were doing. It was a lot of trial and error. And we ended up selling the business. It was a small, modest acquisition, but it got me going in my career. And I owe a lot, frankly, to that early experience of just, you know, rolling up my sleeves and getting dirty and doing it. From there, I started doing work for other companies, and I organically started an agency. So I was in Detroit at the time. I was working in all different types of businesses and small startups, Fortune 500 companies, everything in between. I then,
well, hold on. Let's stop for 1 second. Let's stop for 1 second. Cause let's back up 1 sec.
Yeah.
I want to ask about, so like one thing I love talking about in these conversations I'm having with other, entrepreneurs and business owners,
Sure.
Are those synonyms? Yeah, probably. With other people is that, kind of that foray into entrepreneurialism, right? Like, so let me give you just a little bit of context. Like, so for me, we had a completely different upbringing. Not that my parents weren't supportive, they totally were, but they weren't necessarily entrepreneurial. My dad wasn't an inventor, right? Like this sense of, I wasn't surrounded by this sense of wonder, let's say.
Yeah.
There was encouragement, but it was a bit of kind of figure it out kind of on my own sort of thing. Totally fine. But but entrepreneurialism for me came a little bit late, like well after college. You know, maybe I dipped my toe a little bit. I don't know. One could argue I did, but I really went the traditional route of college, got a job, had developed anxiety about being a human, right? And then in my mid-30s, yeah, exactly. Figured out what taxes were, got a health, like mortgages, all that stuff. Yeah. Got fired once or twice. You know what I mean? Right. So like lived a bit of life before I really earnestly dove into starting a company. Right. You had we had a completely different, experience there. You got right in. And I think like coming in right from college, there is a sense of fearlessness. For me, it was full of it was nothing but fear. Like there was so much apprehension and how I would pay the mortgage and pay bills and feed the dogs. How would I do all these things that I relied on my 9 to 5 for? And I think that that's a challenge, I think, that a lot of people kind of deal with when thinking about starting their own company.
Yeah.
You didn't have that, but you did it a little backwards. So you dove in immediately during and after college, and then backed off. What was that like kind of having, I would assume complete autonomy in your day to day, and then going to work for somebody.
Yeah. Well, while I was working for clients,
Hmm.
it was still my own agency, right? So I still had I still had autonomy in terms
Yeah.
of like, do I want to take that project? Do I want to pass on it? Do I
Right.
want to hire somebody to do that job for me, or do I want to do it myself? Um, it was a little bit different though. I mean, yeah, you're right to your point. I was some of our clients were pretty big. We were working with Lexus on some projects, Chrysler on some projects. And it's a little bit hard in terms of I'm very a visual. That's been my entire life. I've been that way, and I take so much pride in the details. And sometimes it would
Yeah.
be tough. I would want to take a project in one direction, and the client would want to take it in a different direction. You
Oh,
gotta. It's hard. I
tell me
mean, I
about
think
it.
everybody who hears that, who works in a service-based business, will probably relate to it. You got to
Absolutely.
understand that that's what you're there to do. Your job is not to you know uh, your job is not to execute on your vision, it's to execute on theirs, right?
Sure.
So that you're doing a good job if you execute on their vision, right? Um, and frankly, this is a great segue back into the story, is that I got a bit tired of that. I was getting to a point where I was having a tough time sort of like creating these things and then just setting them free and giving them off to a customer, and I would see what
Mm.
would happen sometimes, and they would take me
Oh
in a
my
different
God. Is
direction
there
that I didn't
anything
agree
more
with.
heartbreaking?
It's tough. It's like sending your baby away.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, I know.
and what it did is it drove me back to being in a product based business. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be in a service based business forever. I want to get back into a product company. I want to build something, hang on to it, work on it, iterate on it, build it, watch it succeed, help it succeed, continue to just push it along. And that's what drove me to the next opportunity, frankly.
It was
It
that
was one of our
function.
clients. So the agency was Function. The next company that I worked on was a company called RepPro, REPPRO. It was two young advisors, financial advisors, came to us at Function, the agency, and said, we have this really interesting problem that we want to solve. We're financial advisors, and the application process sucks.
Mm.
We have to fill out these massive applications. I got to fill out my client's name 8 times. I got to fill out their address 4 times. I have to answer yes to question 6 and then add a whole new packet into the app. And they were like, we should be able to do this digitally. And that's what they came to us with. We want to build the universal application for insurance products. So we took them on as a client. I personally kind of like fell in love with the product that we were building. It was an antiquated space. There wasn't a lot of tech, new tech at least, and we were
Right.
building something really cool. So I said to the two guys that came to us with the idea, I said, hey, how do you feel about me and my business partner at the agency, who is a very, very talented young developer? How do you feel about us joining as co-founders? It was still so early, it was just the two of them. They just had an idea. And they said, yeah, let's do it. We could use a product and design as well as a tech co-founder. So we joined the company. Um, we built that company for roughly, I want to say about 3.5 to 4 years. Um, built a nice business out of it. We raised some money, raised from some strategic investors, which really helped get the business off the ground. It was a very real company. We had a decent team size, and eventually the company got bought. Company got bought in November of 2017, which was serendipitously right around the time that the idea for Dutchie kind of came about. I was kind of looking for my next thing. I wasn't totally keen on staying in the fintech space. I wanted to get into something that was a bit more consumer driven and I could have a lot of fun with. My brother, to digress a quick second, my
Hmm.
brother was on a somewhat of a parallel track. So rewind the tape, you know, I was out there starting my, kind of my endeavors, working at my companies. My brother was actually up in Canada, starting the very first online food ordering service in that country. He had done it in the States in college, and then had an opportunity to go up to Canada and be the first. And he built a nice business up there, first to market. They kind of blitzed through the whole country, became the market leader, obviously quickly, because there was really no competition. And when a much larger company tried to come into the space, they said, you know what, why don't we acquire these guys? And that's what happened. And they sold the business. He found himself afterwards back in Bend, Oregon, right? And that's where he decided to lay his roots.
Simultaneously, you guys are starting and starting companies and working on exit plans.
Exactly. So now,
crazy experience to have at such a young age too, because
yeah,
as you're setting yourself up for what's next, all keep going. Yeah, this is great. This is
yeah.
So your brother is now semi-retired. You're now semi-retired.
Well, but the thing is, like, we, what we get, what we're passionate about and what we get motivated by is building things, is building companies, is going out and being challenged to solve really big problems, and then, like, basically, like, getting on that grind and building and building and building.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part for us. And it was lacking a little bit, at when he was up in Oregon. He was kind of looking for the next thing. And the other thing that's important too is what he had done in his career thus far is he became really, really talented in terms of sales and business development. That was his strength. I was on the creative end. He was on the business and sales side. Remember the two halves of my dad. And, we came back together in November of 2017, right around then, to basically look at this problem in the cannabis space. He was waiting in line at a dispensary, and the light bulb kind of went off. He was like, why am I waiting in line? Why can't I order online? And furthermore, it was really topical because right around that time, Oregon became the first state to legalize cannabis delivery. So the timing was really perfect. It was, the stars kind of aligned.
2017.
Right around, it was towards the end of 2017, right around then. And he basically reached out to me and he kind of pitched me the idea. He said, hey, what do you think about, me taking all the things I learned in the food space and bringing them to cannabis? And I could, serve dispensaries instead of restaurants. And I remember having this thought that, like, there'll probably be some challenges. I know there's going to be some challenges. The cannabis space is exciting, and there's a lot happening, and I knew a little bit about it. I'd been, a moderate user in the past, starting to learn a little bit more about it and what it was doing for, some of the states that had legalized it. I was learning about the wellness and health benefits, and it was very interesting. I started to understand and unpack the notion that this wasn't just recreational. This wasn't just something that people were using to get high, like how we've always been sort of, conditioned to think about it. This is something that people are getting real benefit from. This is medicine for a lot of people. And I started to basically come around to this idea that this will be a way that people buy it. This will be a way that people get this access to this product. And just like so many other things that we're used to, with on-demand ordering, with our dinner, with our groceries, with our transportation, with literally everything, a la Amazon, we want things at our fingertips. We want that convenient experience. So why not cannabis? And it makes a ton of sense on the medicinal front and a ton of sense on the recreational front. So long story short, I knew that this was going to be a thing. My only questions were, when is this behavior going to take hold, and who's going to do it? And I remember saying that to him, and I was sort of like, well, why not you, based on your background, right? And he said, well, you want to do it with me? And he's like, I'll take the business and sales side, you take the product and design side. And I was like, this is, yeah, I'm in. Like, the timing's perfect. I'm looking for my next thing. And that was the that's what got this company going in the early days. That was the before Dutchie story.
The brothers.
The
story of the brothers. I think about my brothers, who can barely tie their own shoes. I love them to death. They're amazing brothers. But the thought of starting a company with them, uh, I'm having a panic attack right now thinking about it. I can't see how it would ever work. And this is mostly
Yeah.
on me, not my brothers. You know, like I'm as bullheaded as they come. Um, what's it like working with your brother? And I know I'm jumping ahead. I'm jumping around a little bit
All
here,
good.
but like
No
I'm
worries.
curious
Yeah.
about the relationship of working with your brother because I can't do. I there's no way I could do it. Now, obviously, you guys are different people. You have complementary skill sets. Um, you know, you're on the creative. He's on the sort of the business side of it. Beyond just like the complementary skill set side of it, like how's the day-to-day work out between you guys? Like, have there been moments where you were like, what am I doing? This is this is who's the older brother?
I'm the older brother, but we're close
So
in age,
you're like,
little
how
less
how
than
am
two
I
years.
how am I listening to my younger brother? Like he used to
Well,
blow bubbles in his milk.
and he's our CEO, right? So,
Right.
um, but no, I mean, look, here's the thing: is that um, we complement each other really well,
Yeah,
and that is an important part here. You can't
absolutely.
I can't answer the question without spotlighting that first, because the key is that you have trust and you have respect for one another in those roles. That's important for every set of founders. Is that
Absolutely.
you trust and respect each other in what you do.
The co-founder relationship is for sure like
It's critical.
as it's well it's as delicate as a marriage, like it really is.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways it's equal to a marriage. You know, it's the paperwork
Yeah.
is as complex as a
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
those relationships are difficult, and finding the right people, um it's you know, it's like catching lightning in a bottle. It's one of the hardest. It was for sure a very hard thing for me, not nearly as hard as many people I
Yeah.
know. But it's a critical time in the inception of a company. And luckily, like for you and your brother, you both like, oh, I know that guy. Oh, I know that guy. You know, like I know the guy who can do that, who can design that thing out, and who will, you know, maybe
Yeah.
understand the vision here. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's Mhm.
It's been, it's been, here's the thing is that, yes, like you're always going to be brothers, right?
Mm,
You're always going to have a little more candor with each other than you would with maybe somebody else, right?
sure.
But I view that as a strength for us because we're honest with each other, and we can connect in a way that, frankly, I don't think co-founders that aren't brothers or sisters could. We know each other so well. We know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, we know our blind spots, and you're gonna go through the you're gonna be in the trenches with this person. You're gonna go through some really high highs and some really low lows,
Oh yeah.
and it's gonna get super super tough, And at the end of it all, we're family, right? So like through thick and thin, it's so I think that those things do translate really well, as long as the skill sets are complementary, which for us they really really are. I I'll be honest, my brother and I are very different. If you had him on, you you'd see that. If you had him next to me, you would see that. And we have a lot of similarities, but we're also really different. He's super high energy. He's super speed oriented. He moves really fast. I'm more I'm more, kind of analytical. I like to focus on the details. I like to make sure that we're not just moving really quickly, but we're also doing things in the right way. And the way I like to talk about it is that you can't have two people like me. You can't have two people like him,
Mhm.
right? Two people, we'd either move too slow or you'd move too fast. You'd be too thoughtful or you'd be too reckless. And we balance each other out. We He makes sure that we're still moving at a really fast pace, and I make sure that we're still doing things in the right way. And he's probably had to slow down a little bit. I've probably had to speed up a little bit, and that's the beauty of it. And I always use a phrase like "there's magic in the middle," um, and I think that's why we've been able to build this company quickly and build a product that our dispensaries love.
Talk to me a little bit more about compromise because that is interesting. Like, so I have co-founders, but and we might have our first internet mess up. Nope. Here we go. Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's good. It's good. The mouse is still on the wheel, Zach. The mouse is still on the wheel. Um,
Good to hear.
the compromise for me is, um, and this isn't about like how you guys have actually set yourself up in a corporate structure, but at the end of the day, Ross needs to make a decision about something, right? Like
Yeah.
as CEO, that's, the buck falls with him on kind of what you do. What And I share that, right? So I'm, probably a little more like your brother than, I'm not in charge of design. I have a chief design, a creative director, and
Yeah.
I have people who fill those roles who are partners in the company, and I probably, like your brother, move a little bit fast and rely on them um, to help me figure out which ideas really need to be pursued. Um, what's that compromise like for you two? I mean, like, is there are there decisions you wish were made differently?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, founders might not always see eye to eye on things. It's okay.
Yeah.
Um, Frankly, you got a probably a really big problem if everybody just agrees on everything. Um, I I view this as one of the great parts about starting businesses and working with talented people. Whether it's my brother as our CEO, whether it's somebody else on our leadership team, whether it's a product manager that I work with, who's very new in their career, and they come in with fresh eyes and they're like, "Hey, what if we did it this way?"
Right.
Um, you've got to be okay and welcoming with those other opinions, right? I
100%.
frankly, I mean, it's very important, right? Like we only have I talk about this a little bit at the company. Like we only have one lens to see this world through. That's our own, and it doesn't mean you're always gonna do things the right way just because it's your way, right? Um, and yes, Ross and I have had disagreements. I think all founders have. At the end of the
Definitely.
day, there's a lot of respect there, though, and that's what is always top of mind for us. Is that he respects me in my role, I respect him in his role. He's good at what he does, and I like to think that I'm good at what I do, and have earned that respect, through the course of my career. So we definitely kind of adopt like a little bit kind of like swim lanes. If it's product and design, Ross is almost always going to defer to me.
Mhm.
If he disagrees with the decision, we'll come together and talk about it. And then we do, we carry the culture together. We work on company wide initiatives together. We work on, how we want to talk to press, and how we want, the company to be portrayed publicly and things like that. We do work on those things together. And as long as our opinions are always valued, which I do believe they are, then we're in good shape. Disagreements will happen. It's part of the job.
Totally, and it's an important takeaway from, the point you're making for, hopefully people listening, which is like there really is no rule book to this. There really is no right or wrong way per se. It's slightly subjective, but the im- one of the important skill sets any entrepreneur needs to have is the ability to be open-minded and not so bullheaded,
Yeah.
or um yeah, you need to be able to take feedback. You need to be able to hear new ideas. And that is something I like. I'm the most self-aware about that specific thing. Like, I could fill hours of podcasts with all the stuff I don't know, right? And
Yeah.
especially like starting a company in the cannabis space, like I really rely on my team. I really rely on my clients. And I'm sure you can relate. I really rely on my clients to pop the bubble we're in and give me a new perspective and let me know what's going on, or like this dispensary in this part of the country are facing these problems that maybe we can help with, or not, or we have a solution that we know about. It's really like having, a wide perspective on all of this. Like that's the only way you can be successful, is really just like relying on the team and trying to kind of uh figure out the best solutions forward. I can
Yep.
totally relate to that, man. I can totally relate to that. I mean, I often, sit back in team meetings and high level meetings. I sit back and a lot of times say very little, which is surprising. Right?
Good,
You know,
good.
it's
We
yeah,
need to listen. That
yeah,
it's one of the most important things that leaders can do is listen. It's not always a situation where you need to be the one talking, right?
totally.
Hopefully you've got really smart people around you. That's your job, right? Is to make sure that you've got smart people at the table. And then your next job is to make sure you listen to them, right? Those are the key things in being a leader and being a founder.
Totally. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I definitely, I grew up playing sports, and if you did, you probably can't relate to this, which is I sucked at sports mostly, but I played sports my whole life, or my whole
Yeah.
young life, and usually felt more akin to um, the coaches, right, and how they were able to figure out where to put the weakest links, on the team, or where to put,
Yeah.
how to sort of distribute, manage your talent, so to speak. And that was something I
Sure.
felt like I could relate to way more than actually like playing the sport. Um,
Well,
anyway,
it probably makes sense where you're at today then.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, maybe
a lot of
probably
a lot of parallels.
Phil Jackson. That's how I think of myself.
There you go. There you go.
Is that too high?
No, I mean, hey, set the bar high, you know?
Well, to that point, my skill set's really in that team building. I'm the sales guy, the relationship guy, putting the right energy in the right place to get a specific problem solved. I'm not so much the innovator. I definitely inspire ideas. I definitely have ideas, but I'm not the one sort of putting pencil to paper in that way. I rely on people to do that. Can you
Sure.
and that's you, right? So can you talk to me about the importance of innovation, especially as a tech company? And let me just add one more thing to this, which is you're the first, yeah, you're the first guest that I've had that's been in tech, right? So like
Okay.
in cannabis tech, which is sort of,
Yeah.
CannaPlanners is an agency, but we lean heavily on the sort of tech side, the internet side of things. So I want to nerd out a little bit with you. I want you to kind of talk to me about the importance of innovation and how you rely on your teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course very, very important. I think no matter what, part of the space you're in, if we're in tech, we're gonna use technology, we're gonna use software to innovate. If you're a brand, um, you know, making sure that you're innovating there is really important. If you're an agency, can you do some innovative things to differentiate yourself from your competitors? I think it's important everywhere. It's a different mechanism and a different vehicle that you're going to use to get there. Uh, for us, it's product development. I think we're constantly trying to solve problems in really interesting ways that are specific to the space. That's one thing that is sort of a for me is a bit obvious in terms of how we want to innovate. It's how can we take e-commerce, which has been around for a long time, which has been which is pretty mature, right?
Mhm.
In most
Yeah.
spaces, in many spaces, cannabis is like maybe one of the last verticals kind of because of it's legal um, status to be able to be sold online. So we can very easily take things from e-commerce and just plop them into Dutchie and say it worked there, it'll work here.
Yeah.
And some of those, in many instances, that will work, right? But if you want to innovate, you can't just do it that way. That's the status quo, right? That's not innovation. That is literally just taking something from one place and putting it somewhere else. Um, it's you have to look at problems on their own. You have to look at them uniquely, and you have to challenge the status quo to say like, how are we going to do it differently? How are we going to understand this problem intimately so that we can solve it in a really creative and interesting way? With cannabis, you have to understand the nuances of the space. They're going to lead you to innovation. They're going to You learn about the customers, learn about the product. It will lead you to really interesting innovations of, and it's built around the differences that exist in cannabis. In our space, inventory turnover is incredibly high, higher than most other adjacent industries. Like how often, I joke around a little bit, like in online food, that's where our roots are. Like, how often does the pizza store run out of pepperonis?
Right.
It's
Never.
pretty rare,
Yeah.
right? How often do they run out of cheese? Like, in a dispensary, they run out of their products all the time.
Yep.
The stat that we've identified is roughly around 40% of the shelf is going to turn over week to week. Like, that's insane. That's super high. So, that's an interesting problem. I like to think of problems as opportunities. That's an opportunity to innovate and come up with really interesting solutions to help make that efficient for retailers, make that efficient for consumers, right? How can we, if what does that mean? You start to kind of peel back the layers and walk your way back to the initial problem, and you go, all right, well, if consumers, if inventory is changing so often, then we need to give consumers a real-time experience, because they're always going to be wondering what's on the shelf, right? And how do we do that, right? And we've come up with some interesting ways of doing that. We've worked with some of the point of sale companies to kind of integrate and make sure that we're creating a very real-time environment. And then how can you translate that into the user experience and make sure that they understand that things are changing pretty rapidly, right? That it's just one example.
Right.
You look at the space right now. We're doing some really interesting work on the educational side. So, how can we surface more attributes that are specific to cannabis, terpenes, cannabinoids, things like that. And we can get those out in
Right.
front of consumers, and they can be more informed. They can learn more about the products. They can shop based on that information. And then furthermore, the last one is talking to your customers is the best source of innovation. I think that there's sort of like a trope around innovation that, like, oh, you got to be a really creative person and you got to sit in the corner of a room and come up with really, really interesting ideas and like get really creative, and it's on you to come up with what the future looks like. I don't think that's true. You're in my opinion, you're sort of the filter, right? Like, your customers are going to give you a lot of the input that you need.
Totally.
You're sort of getting that data in and you're molding it. You know what I mean? You're saying, like, all right, I'm listening to you guys about what you're. Yeah, I have some incredible dispensaries that I work with that are doing some really, really innovative things in their stores, and I'm listening to them. I'm talking to them. I'm saying, show me what you're doing. And
Yep.
then I'm looking at how I can bring those things to the online world, in really interesting ways. Like, how, one example is that when I started talking to customers about their in-store experiences, they were like, oh, shelf space is super important.
Mhm.
Like, I want things on, this, I want this product at eye level because I really want to move it. And, right below it is another product. And I'm prioritizing our vertically integrated, brand, because we want to move our own brand. And that was so much data for me. That may not be something that's groundbreaking for the in-store experience, but doesn't what can I do to translate that to the online world? And what came out of that was, we were launching a new menu relatively soon. It was a redesign. And what came out of it was this concept of a homepage, that instead of jumping them right into the menu items, we could give them a homepage that was the representation of the digital shelf. It
Awesome.
we would allow them to control it, not just say, like, okay, we're going to put flower above pre-rolls, above vaporizers. It was, no, we're going to give you the ability to create those sections. You can
Yeah, that's
do,
awesome.
you could put your brand front and center because you want to move those products. Maybe you're partnering with a brand. You could then showcase that brand. Maybe you want specials at the top of your menu. Well, it's digital. So you might not be running specials every day. What if I give you a way to just set that so that when you're running specials, they immediately pop up? And then when they go away at the end of the day, that section disappears. So we kind of automated the digital shelf and gave our dispensaries a ton of control over how to do that, how
Yeah,
to manage it.
that's brilliant. You totally lose that on normal e-commerce where it's like, sort A to Z or sort by price or or, you know, whatever it is, you know, and especially now, and this is something I'm also interested in, which is the age of stay at home, the age of quarantine, the age of,
Yeah.
you know, retail has suffered hugely in the last. Can you imagine that it's almost been a year um, uh, since the first stay at home order? Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
But you know, the innovation during a time like this, where your entire business model is complementary to the, you know, either curbside, well, not, I guess curbside at the time didn't even exist, but the in-store retail experience. Um, so what were you thinking in March? Let me tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking,
Yeah.
oh shit. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You know, we work with lots of dispensaries too. We work with lots of CBD
Yeah.
retailers. We work with
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
brands that rely on retailers, you know. Uh, what were you thinking? What were you
What was I
feeling,
thinking?
man?
Probably some of the same thoughts you were. I mean, on a personal level, it was a really scary time. On a
Yeah.
professional level, I had this. I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was conflicted. I was conflicted because our business started growing really, really fast, like really fast. Like basically, what happened with cannabis is that pretty much every state, with the exception of Massachusetts, and they finally came around, said cannabis is an
Essential.
essential business. We're going to allow dispensaries to stay open. Everybody else has to shut down. However, you can't have your physical stores open. So do the math. Like, what did that leave everybody with? One way to sell their product, which was
Hmm.
us. It was online
Yeah.
ordering, right? So
It's
my
crazy
head,
hearing you say this. It's crazy hearing you say this because, like, I'm obviously being flippant, and you know,
yeah,
the immediate panic I felt,
I
because
know,
I did like that.
yeah,
Those first few days I was like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, we have you know, I have employees to take care of, I've got customers to serve. Like, how are they gonna stay in business? You know, like, how are people gonna stay healthy? All of this stuff. But meanwhile, and you know, like, we made a small CannaPlanners made a small pivot, and
yeah,
we had a similar experience as you did. It wasn't, I don't
mhm,
think, to the scale that you experienced, but
yeah,
we had a similar experience where we had the best year yet you know, this past year,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
for
mean,
many of the same reasons.
the conflict came from the fact that I was talking to my friends and I was talking to people, and people were losing their jobs,
Yeah.
and people were going through really, really rough times, and I couldn't relate to that because for me it was not like, I wasn't like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Of course, like it was terrible. The pandemic was raging. There were people that were losing their lives, families were being torn apart because of this. And
Yeah.
we we were the business thriving. The way I remember the way I reconciled it was that I realized that we were the lifeline for these dispensaries, that we were the only way that they were keeping their doors open, that they were keeping their lights on, that they were keeping their employees, their staff employed. And we were how people were able to still get their medicine, probably at a time where they arguably needed it the most. They were going
Yeah.
through a lot of tough stuff back then, and they still are today. And like I said before on this episode, like it's medicine for a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
we can't forget that. People are using this product for their health, for their well-being. We've got to break that stigma that this is something that just provides recreational benefit. It is medicine. And we were helping people get that, right? So that's how I reconciled it. That's how I came around to this concept of like, all right, you know what? We're doing a lot of good right now. Um, we're on a mission to make sure that the company has a mission to make sure that we are creating safe and easy access for the people that need it, and the people that want access to it. And we were able to make good on that mission, especially during the pandemic when people really needed it. The My next thought was, how do we support these retailers through
Mm.
this? Because business is about to change in a huge, huge way. Like, what does this look like now? And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I started listening. We started listening. My product team got on the phone with these customers and said, "What are you guys doing? How are your businesses changing?" And everybody said one thing, you already touched on it, curbside pickup. We
Mm-hmm.
have to move to curbside pickup. And here's the thing is that, and I love that we talked about innovation, because I'm going to tie it back here too. We did the easy thing first. We went ahead and said, all right, we're going to launch a new order type. We've always had pickup. We've always had delivery. We've always had kiosk in-store ordering. We're going to launch curbside pickup now. Easy, right? Give the customer an option to select another type at checkout. We added a little bit of information at checkout to say that, this dispensary is reacting due to health and safety concerns. And now we offer curbside pickup. So the customer had a little bit more information, and they chose curbside pickup, and we sent the order through. That was the easy thing. We did that fast. We worked overnight. We worked throughout the weekend on that one. We got it out fast. Then we started talking to customers more, because you can't stop there. You can't just go ahead and say, okay, you got curbside pickup. We're going to move on back to our roadmap. See you later. Have fun. Enjoy.
Right.
We started talking to them more, and we started identifying that there were more problems to solve, more opportunities. They started saying, well, we don't have a way to know when our customers show up. And I said, well, what are you doing today? And they go, oh, we just have them call us. And so often in technology, it's like these inefficiencies using kind of old archaic ways of doing things, whether it be
Right.
software, whether it be phones. They're putting up signs in the window that says, when you show up, call us. And we were like, well, we have access to a lot of great things. We have this interface that they're using at the store. We have these terminal iPad devices that we give them where the orders pop out. And we have the customer's attention. So why don't we tie that all together and create a really cool, innovative system that allows the customer to notify the dispensary that they're there, and then go even one step further and tell the dispensary how to find them. So we launched the second half of curbside pickup, which we called Arrivals. And Arrivals was this really cool way of basically the customer clicking a link when they get notified that the order is ready, and they can then enter in, potentially the make, model, color, maybe it's the license plate. We gave the dispensary the ability to control the question, because we just saw a lot of different operational setups, and they were able to very conveniently and easily tell the dispensary how to find them, and it worked. It worked
That's
really
awesome.
well, and there's one more example of innovation just by
Yeah.
listening to customers.
It's so important. I mean, we, as of beyond like account management and, check-ins with customers, we try to, we definitely, have been doing so much more, especially during this time of just, yeah, doing that, listening, being, if nothing but to be empathetic, right? Like you hope that there's a solution that you can dig out of that, but at the end of this, we're humans like going through this like really weird thing.
Yeah.
It's a shared experience that we all have together.
Yeah.
We kind of talk, so tech is fickle, right? And we talk at CannaPlanners, we're still very much in that startup-ness. We have plenty of customers and, lots of employees to service those customers, but we call it building the bridge as we're crossing it, right? I'm
Yeah.
curious about how other companies, specifically Dutchie, handles refining products while Ross is trying to meet, certain self-imposed sales goals, right? Like how has this been balanced? So like I'm curious just about like growth versus iteration. And I guess you touched a little bit about on failure there, but like how failure even plays into that and making that iteration stronger.
Yeah. So, we're a very growth minded company. We've been that way since day one. We have a speed is very core to how we operate. Um, so again, we've kind of met this. We've found some a really nice place in the middle of speed and quality. Never sacrificing quality, of course, but still making sure that we're moving really quickly and meeting the needs of our dispensaries as well as our teams. Our sales team moves really quickly too. And the product, when retailers see the product, they see something that they know was built for them.
Yep.
um when we see things like this, if you're a retailer and you're taking a look at something that is specific to your business, you identify with the problems that you have. You go ahead and say, oh, I have that problem. Wow, that solves that really well. And that goes back to kind of the theme is like, listen to your customers. That's how innovation happens. Um, we've always been really aligned in terms of what the sales goals are in terms of growth and what we need to build. So we do have strategic bets. We have things that we are really interested in doing, which are highly native, which are really new to this space. It's a balancing act. You have to make
Yeah.
sure that you're giving those time, but you also have to make sure that we're building for growth too. Um, you know, the space moves super fast, right? The growth rate in cannabis is just like astounding.
Yeah.
So we've got to adapt to that. We have to make sure that we're keeping up with it. We have to make sure that we're working with our sales team, to give them what they need to go out and continue to push the company forward and to grow our business and bring on more customers. But at the same time, we have to also execute on vision. And we have big things that we want to do with this business, and we got to make sure that we give kind of ample time to both. It's a balancing act. I won't lie.
Hell yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious about fundraising. It's especially in tech and in cannabis, there's a lot of dollars being thrown around, and it's, easy for companies to um go that route. It's not the route we've gone yet at CannaPlanners. I imagine
Yeah.
it'll happen at some point. But I'm curious about um I'm just hoping you can demystify that a bit for me. And also, like, I'm curious
Yeah.
about the emotional aspect of it. And I guess what I'm getting at is, like, you kind of talking about it earlier, like, when you were working for your agency and you had to let your baby back, into the wild. Like, you know, your company is that too. If it's not, the projects you're doing for clients, it's the company itself. And I think for sure that's something that I've been battling with a little bit as I, prepare for a series of fundraising. I'm just curious your take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think that venture capital specifically is right for everybody.
Right.
I, I think what you need to do is you need to understand what type of business you want to build. Um, there might be a tendency for a lot of entrepreneurs to be like, oh, I want to build a massive business. I want the thing to be worth $1 billion. I want to have tons of employees. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs have that vision in mind, and then
Sure.
it's a glamorous picture, right? When you think of it like that in the early days, especially, it's not right for everybody. That is very high risk, and if you decide that that's the path you want to go on, you better be ready to give up a lot of your company. It takes inordinate amounts of capital to do that, and to really execute on that, to really grow at that pace, to hire a lot of people, to build out a lot of different teams, um, to get comfortable spending a ton of money every month in order to do it. It's not for everybody. You've
Yeah.
got to be able to stomach that, and frankly, you need to want that. You need to want to be for that to be your day to day for a long time. Um, for some people, that's right. That's the route that we went, and it's hard. It's been a hard road, and like I said, high highs, low lows. You got to get really comfortable being in the trenches all the time. We are, we kind of don't know it any other way. That's how Ross and I are. We like that. It's energizing. It's motivating. We like to roll our sleeves up. We do. We really do. And we've had so much joy building those teams and working with some insanely talented people and hiring great people. And those are building a culture, like a really strong culture where people enjoy working and coming to work, and they like their colleagues and they get involved in events. And those are the things that we take a ton of pride in. It's not,
Absolutely.
and it again, even as I'm saying it, I'm like, wow, this probably sounds really appealing. It it's not the path for everyone. Think about what your business goals are. Do you want to build a lifestyle business? Do you want to support yourself and maybe your family? Do you want to have a couple employees? Do you want to be just a solo entrepreneur, right? There's different ways of doing this. There's different ways of being a business owner. Some of those paths require capital. Some of them require outside capital. You don't have to go the VC route. VCs are looking for very specific things. They're looking for big returns. They're going to actually want you to spend their money. If you're not doing that, you're not doing it right. And you've also got to get comfortable giving up a decent percentage of your company. That's how, that's what it takes in order
That's
to
the
raise the
give
kind
and
of
take.
capital. Yeah, man, it really is going to take. And so I would advise people to look to try to understand the type of business you want to build, and then try to understand after that is do I need a ton of capital? And if I do, am I very comfortable with a super aggressive plan to build this business? And am I going to be okay with going through some tough times and some high highs and low lows?
And just like the co-founder thing, like it's really about finding that right partnership,
Yeah,
in addition to being able to uh write the checks, like they have to understand and buy into the vision of in this case what Dutchie's trying to do. It's such an important, it's such a valuable lesson that you can only learn really by
yeah,
you know doing it. And you're right, it's
totally.
absolutely about not only the life that the entrepreneur is trying to build for themselves, but also um yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head right there. Like it's for sure about um the growth plan versus that life that you're trying to build versus all of it. You guys
It's
having a growth.
Will,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's worth noting too that I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that
Yeah.
about that have all different types of businesses. You know, just because you have 1,000 employees and a multi-billion-dollar valuation, it doesn't necessarily translate to a particular financial outcome. You might think
Oh, of
that
course.
you might think like, oh, those people have this massive financial windfall because the business is it's that's not the case. I've talked to entrepreneurs who have 50 employees, 30 employees that have wildly capital efficient businesses that didn't have to raise venture capital, and they're going to be far better off, you know, in the long run than the person on the other hand that went out and raised a ton of money from VCs, got diluted, you know, down to a very small ownership percentage in the business, and who knows what their outcome is going to look like. It's just there's a lot of different ways to get from A to Z with this.
100%. And I think
Yeah,
a lot of times it boils down to growth plan versus like testing viability, like
yeah,
ensuring that the business, putting in that time in the beginning, to ensure the business has legs, that it makes sense, that people will buy into it, that maybe you can sell it, right?
that's right.
Sell the service or the product or whatever it is the company
Mhm.
is, right? And from there you can make decisions. But I think you're absolutely right. Like it's such a crazy, it really boils down to me, you know, growth, growth trajectories. How fast are you willing to get this? How badly do you want to beat out um, existing or future competition? Like, how quickly does the company need to gain market share?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's hard to do on your own, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, Zach, I appreciate your time very much. I'm going to leave you with one really terrible question, and
Oh
that's
boy.
what's next? How is Dutchie changing the world in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So that's not a terrible question. Come on.
I read it in a
You
book.
see, dude, you had me scared. I was like, oh God, what's coming? This is the best question. Um, Look, I
I'm going to
touched on it
admit
before.
Ross into the room now. Now we're going to hear the actual side of the story.
Oh boy. Oh my God, you'll need a lot more time. No, I think I mentioned it before. The business is we're really excited about the opportunity in this space because um this has been a an industry and a product that has been so stigmatized and so misrepresented in our culture, in our
Mhm.
country, throughout the world, the past 40 years, and it's done some damage the way that we've perceived this. And we have this unique once in a lifetime opportunity to for people in this space to dig in and help to right the ship, to help bring it back to what it always was before that, to what it could be in the future, to help make sure that people are getting access to this. Like I said, who need it, and who should have access to this. We're just scratching the surface of what this product can do for people. We haven't even been able to research it properly. Like, I can't wait to see a decade from now when we look back and I can listen to this episode and go, man, like, I was kind of talking about it, but wow, look what they ended up doing. Look what they ended up finding out. Like, and what I'm excited the most about is that we get to be hopefully a part of that story. We're,
100%.
we're excited about that. Like, I wake up every morning energized because of that. So,
I'm
you
psyched
know,
to hear you say that, because that is definitely something we share professionally, which is, as founders of companies in this industry, in the timing of the industry where we find ourselves, the responsibility that you just alluded to, it is so important. I hear all the time, I'm sure you do too, about cash windfalls and, the green rush. And Eh, I don't know about that. I think that there's a lot of hype, but I think mostly you're right. There's been disproportionately more suffering as a result of as a result of the war on drugs, as a result on prohibition, all of these things, that anybody getting into
yeah,
this industry now, no matter what it is, has to have their third eye open, and looking down the path of social responsibility, and also working, because there's a lot of work to do. Zach, this as well as
yeah,
I do. There's a lot, especially from the designs, and a lot of it falls on design, really.
yeah,
There's a lot of responsibility for companies like us to really do what we or like ours, to do what we can, to help shatter that perception that's been hammered into the world, but the American society for the past 80 years, I would say. But um, I I love hearing you say that. Zach Lipson, Chief Product Officer of Duchy. I appreciate the heck out of you, man. It has been a pleasure speaking with you in your not hotel room. Thank you so much. Tell the people listening where they can find out more about Duchy.
yeah. So you can visit our website at Dutchie.com. That's our marketplace. Down in the footer, you can view some more information about how we work with dispensaries. We're on LinkedIn. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We regularly contribute, stories and things that we're working on there, as well as Instagram. So you can follow us there. We are Dutchie is our handle there.
We will link all of those things in the description here in
Great.
YouTube down there. Zach Lipson, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I hope we can do this again sometime. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Will. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.